Hey there, and welcome to yet another episode of the Virtual CISO podcast. With you, as always, John Verrett, your host, and with me today, Chris Ciabarra, and I hope I got the pronunciation of that last name right. A lot of vowels. I'm guessing it's a good Irish name, right, Chris?
Italian.
Really?
Yeah, Ciabarra. Ciabarra, hey.
All right, now you know what? You didn't use I didn't use my hand, which is why it didn't sound right. Ciabarra. How are you today, man?
Excellent, thanks. It's a beautiful day here in California.
Don't rub it in. It actually is a beautiful day here. Like I'm looking out the window in my office, and all of the trees are flowering. So we got all of the early tree flowers out,
Oh, wow.
which is cool because finally we're out of the damn winter and we're towards spring.
Where you at?
And at least we'll have. I'm in New Jersey.
Oh, New Jersey. I grew up in Philly, so.
Yeah. Oh, listen, we're right down towards Philly. You're outside of Princeton, if you
Oh,
know
nice.
that area. So
Yeah,
yeah,
of course.
then you know the area. All right. So before we get down to business, wait. You got me off my game here. Can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what is it that you do every day?
Sure thing. My name is Chris Ciabarra. I'm with Athena Security, CTO, co-founder over here. And what I do every day is pretty much either build product features, answer phone calls. It's a walk-through metal detector, allows people to walk through without even knowing it's there. It's two like poles that you kind of blend into your background. Leave your keys, leave your phone in your pockets. You just walk right through. So it's the new invention where you don't have to take anything out of your bags and stuff.
Hopefully they're going to get them at the TSA soon because I'm tired of getting naked to get on a plane. But anyway, we'll drill a little on the product in a couple minutes here.
Okay.
Before we get down to business, we always ask, what's your drink of choice?
Drink of choice is actually going to be tequila. I like wine too. 'Cause I'm
I
in
thought
wine country,
based
of
on our
course.
preliminary conversation, I thought we were going to say wine. Which tequila? Are you a Sammy Hagar fan? Or are you
When I
which way
go
do you go on
out,
tequilas?
I do Don Julio Añejo when I go out and about.
Mhm.
But at home,
Mhm.
I mean, I forget the name of it. 1 second, let me grab it real quick. This stuff is to die for. Can't even tell the name. This stuff right here. If you've ever seen it, it's really good.
Wow. No, you know what? I think I may have actually seen that. So I live across the street from a nut
Oh yeah,
who has 600 bottles. He has a bar in his garage.
jeez.
He's got two kegs on tap. He's got two fridges loaded with microcraft beers. He's got 600 bottles of wine in his basement, and he's got
Jeez.
600 bottles of alcohol in the house. And I kid you not, he's got 100 plus bottles of bourbon, but he's also a tequila guy.
Nice.
So I've drank some really good tequilas over there. It's funny. I tend to drink tequilas when I'm skiing, and I don't know why, but I mean, like that's tends to be when I end up with a tequila in my
Nice.
hand.
Keeps you
And I
warm.
just got back from Jackson Hole and did indeed have a couple tequilas in my hand at some point. So I did have one question to ask you. So I know you're out in San Fran, and I know we briefly before we started recording, you mentioned that you were also a fan of Russian River wines. Any particular ones? Just because that tends to be what we drink as well in our house.
Yeah, I don't know the name of it, but it is phenomenal. I'll get back to you
All
on
right,
that
so you
one.
owe me an email. You owe me an email
You
after
got
the
it.
meeting. All right. So thank you for coming on. We're in an interesting point in the information security field. We're seeing a consolidation of areas that used to be different from information security. I'm going to call them neighboring areas. Think privacy, right?
Hmm.
Privacy has recently become highly integrated with information security. And now we're starting to see the same thing with physical security. Again, previously a different domain, but we're starting to see that integration, or what they refer as convergence. And a lot of that's being driven by the critical infrastructure systems agency, right, which is responsible for administering the security of the 16 critical information sectors to the U.S. economy. And they recently published what they called the Physical and Cybersecurity Convergence Guide. So, as a physical security guy, how would you define physical and cybersecurity convergence?
Sure. So if you look at the two sectors before, there was two different people heading up each, and it just makes sense to combine them together. Why is that? Well, everything is IoT based. Everything has an internet connection these days. So all the physical stuff that didn't have an internet connection years ago now does. So now you have a lot more threats happening. You have a lot more things you have to worry about. And the typical physical infrastructure personnel didn't have a clue about cyber, right? They didn't know. They just plugged it in and it worked, whatever. They didn't worry about the security side. Well, now that needs to get fixed because there's a lot of holes in these types of physical environments, that physical security products that people aren't aware of. So that's why I think they're combining them, because it just makes sense, right? Everything is connecting to the internet now, and everything should be secured properly, and security folks should be have control over this kind of stuff. Cyber
Gotcha.
folks.
Gotcha. And that made me think of an interesting question that I wouldn't have thought to ask you. Um, is your device an IoT device?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it has to be. So everything that's, and if an alert goes off, you get an automatic, text on your phone. You get the picture of the person on your phone. So everything's plugged in. Absolutely.
Gotcha. So that means you have the privilege of dealing with the California SB 386 and all the other fun stuff that's around IoT security, right?
Yep.
You gotta love those.
HIPAA. I mean, all
Gotta
the different
love the
kinds.
gotta love the California Attorney General. He makes our lives really nice. So other than IoT devices, anything else that you think is like driving this idea of physical and cybersecurity convergence?
Well, I think it's just personnel specialties, right? I think it just makes sense to plug everything on the internet and and converge the two groups together. A
Gotcha.
lot of disconnects before.
Okay. So yeah, so to that end, right? So you said some disconnect. So I guess one of the benefits is that we're closing some of those disconnects. What are some of the other benefits that you would say that this convergence provides?
Well, it depends on what your angle is. I think it's going to speed up certain things, especially when you're installing products. You don't have to go to two different groups for meetings. It's going to be one group for meetings. It's going to speed up those types of integrations from third parties and whatnot. It'll also obviously give companies better security, right? Because before, physical folks plug it in and it works. They don't think about the ramifications and the hacks that are in these types of equipment. They're buying cameras from China. They don't realize it. It's underneath a different name. And guess what? They have back doors in them, and they're plugging them on their network, and they don't realize, oh, that should be on a separate network. That doesn't touch your internal network. So I think a lot of that's going to get fixed. A lot less hacks will happen because of it. And it's the right direction to go for sure.
Yeah, and one of the things which I think, like, I think we're increasingly recognizing the risk of internet connectivity to IoT devices. But I think what's cool about the convergence is I don't think most people recognize that the risk posed by getting proximate to a device is different than the risk posed by connecting to the device across the internet, right? Because many of these devices have multiple forms of networking, right? Whether it's in, they can be wireless, they can be wired, right? They also have interfaces on them, right? They might have an RS-232 port, they might have an Ethernet jack, right? So you have this ability to connect to the device directly, right? So you could have all the outside security in the world that prevents someone from talking to that device unless it's, talking from a particular data center, but you can get to it. And then perhaps even more importantly, if I can get to a device and it has any type of a debug interface, or if it's got any, perhaps I can get down into the firmware, or if I can physically get to the device and I can open the device up and I can get down to the board level, right? And I can connect to the board itself. And sometimes you open up a board and you'll see like an SD drive, and you can just pop the SD drive out and you've got the firmware for the device. You can, reverse compile it, change it, put it back in, and hey, now the device is doing something it was never intended to do. So I think that's a really big advantage. The other one that increasingly is part of the conversation that I'm having, I don't know if you're having the same conversations, but having a unified view of risk across the organization is critical, right? So all too often, like, you had the risk from a physical perspective, which uses different thought processes and different methodologies, like RAV, if you're familiar with that. That's one of the methodologies. You've got your information security risk management, which uses like confidentiality, integrity, availability as impact criteria, and you got your enterprise risk management, which uses more business type things like impact operations, legal and reputational risk, things of that nature. I think the more that we can get to a unified conversation about risk, and all assets of risk are being communicated in the same language, the language of the business, I think it just puts us all in a better spot. So I would think that this physical and cybersecurity convergence really is going to simplify risk management as well, right?
I totally agree with that. Absolutely. Just like what I was saying before, it's going to make it more secure, so your risks are going to go down because you have more control over it.
Yeah. And then the other thing too is that increasingly what we're seeing is these physical security controls are increasingly becoming an obligation of the information security frameworks that people become certified to. Right. So like ISO 27001 as an example has a requirement for physical security. So, this idea that the folks that are managing the information security program are going to have some responsibility for ensuring physical security. That's another good reason, I think, in terms of sort of integration as well.
Oh, absolutely, and especially with data. Our system can also link down to a USB stick, right? A lot of companies don't want USB sticks leaving their facilities because obviously that could be information, or we can tailor it to a board. They don't want these certain boards to leave. There's certain companies out there that have proprietary information on boards, and they don't want them to leave their facility. So yeah, all that type of physical security is definitely needs to be tied in and locked up for less risk.
Gotcha. Now you are a physical security company. We're an information security company, so I think our perspectives and our experiences are going to be different. So as a physical security company, do you see a lot of convergence actually taking place yet? And if you do, is it a particular market sector? And if so, why is that particular sector more advanced than this?
Yeah, I mean, we deal with every sector really: hospitals, churches, universities, you name it. We pretty much deal with even casinos. And in some instances, you will walk in on the first day and it is split, and then by the end of the sale, it's combined. So we've ran into that before. I mean, these sales take sometimes 6 months. So these types of things. So I think it's an ongoing process right now with a lot of companies. Some are slower than others. Some are obviously, already have done this. So it's just going to be a process. I think the next 4 years, everything is going to be converted, and the two um, how do you pronounce that? Two sectors are combined: the physical and the cyber.
Yeah, that's what we're saying, and it's interesting because, like, if you go back, only a year ago, right? So we have a guy who works here, our practices director. He formerly headed up physical security for a Global 2000 firm, and he was the person that introduced me to this idea. And it was only a year ago of physical and cyber, and the organization he worked with actually was converging the two. So I thought that was interesting. Now, what was interesting to me as well is one of the core parts of what he did was make sure that people were protected as well, right? So he was.
What do you mean?
Well, I mean physical security. Right. So
protecting the people.
yeah.
Got
So
it,
you
got
think
it.
about it.
I thought you meant their jobs or something.
Well, yeah. If you get shot, as you could probably tell, you no longer have a job. So yeah, I guess indirectly you're protecting jobs. But it was interesting to me as we started having these conversations. So my first view of physical and cyber convergence was through him, and I knew he was responsible for events and even for executives traveling into at-risk countries and things of that nature. So I thought physical and cyber convergence would also included people, but when I looked at the CISA's guidance, it wasn't explicit. And I don't know about other forms of guidance. So I'm just curious, from your perspective, does CISA's guidance not calling out people specifically surprise you?
It does, because I think their lives obviously are bigger risk than anything else that's out there. So protecting that, I think, would be number one. Board meetings we protect. These things are portable, so you can take them anywhere you want, which is awesome when you travel and you need protection. So you should definitely have a solution for meetings, especially like board meetings in your facility. And if you're traveling, you should have some kind of solution that you travel with, because you don't want someone to shoot up the crowd when you're in the middle of a meeting or something. People come in.
Yeah. So
events.
Yeah, so in prep for this, like you and I had a conversation a couple weeks ago. So it did intrigue me. So I started doing some searching for any standards that really related. I didn't see any. Are you aware of any particular standards that would define that would mandate, as an example, the implementation of a system like yours that detect guns in an entryway or something of that nature?
Sure. I mean, there's none that we know of. There are standards, obviously, for a detection system, government standards that you have to pass, which we do pass 100% of. But as far as standards that physically implement a metal detector, we haven't seen those, or I don't know of them right now.
That's interesting. Yeah, because like you said, all right, we're going to protect the IoT devices. The hell with the people.
That will definitely change soon, I'm sure.
Yeah, anyway. So
that's a good point, though. We should make.
Yeah, well, listen. If there was a standard, your life would be a lot easier, right? It's like, hey guys, you don't have a choice but to implement this. So So I think you've kind of touched on it tangentially a little bit. Can you kind of dig in a little bit more, talk about your product, exactly how it works? Who are the primary customers, users of this, and what is the driver that convinces folks that they need a product of this nature?
Sure thing. The sad part is, I'll start with what's the driver. Usually, when there's an incident in their area, is when everyone wakes up and goes, "Oh boy, we need to do something about this." I was just in New York at a church. It happened at a church, and all the churches in the neighborhood are getting them.
And real
So I
quick,
think
for
those are
you,
those kind
define an incident. What is the
of
like
incident.
a shooting? Is that
Got it.
what you mean when you say an incident?
Um, any an incident is anywhere from finding a weapon to it
Okay.
shooting. And this happens to be a shooting in New York. It happened. But I mean, hospitals, same thing. ER, one of the gang members happens all the time. I hear this all the time from the hospitals. ER, someone comes in the ER from a gang shooting, and all the other gang members come in, and now there's a shootout in the ER from the two
Oh,
gangs because one person's, yeah, it's a nightmare for these hospitals. So that's the kind of situations you run into. And when that kind of stuff happens, they wake up, like, oh, we need this. And that's great for us. Obviously, it's bad for them. But these companies need to be foreseeing this kind of stuff instead of just waiting for something to happen and then doing something about it. Obviously, because these things can be prevented if they had systems in place to protect them and their employees and their guests. Um, so yeah,
and
it varies.
and
So
then talk a little bit about how the product works. So this is
oh
this
sure,
almost like walking through the metal detectors at an airport? It does kind of look like that.
it's it's a little bit different. The visual is just two poles, so you can actually embed these. You can put coverings on them so that you can't even see them. They kind of like fade in the background. A lot of companies are starting to do
Hmm.
that we work with. We also have an iPad that you can visually see the person going through, and then it gives them a clear or an X, and it texts them. If something happens, it'll text them on their phone. All the security folks that have the app downloaded, the person's face, who they are, when they came in, all the information in real time goes right to their phone. Uh, it's really easy to convert, to travel with. They're 35 pounds a pull, so they're really easy to pick up and place down. And within 60 seconds, you could be up and running. It's a really simple device. It works with metal, active and passive metal detection, and it has 300 antennas compared to like the 30 antennas regular metal detectors have. And this allows the system to differentiate between a gun and a cell phone. Right. So the old systems, you have to take everything out of your pockets because you can't differentiate. But now we can differentiate. Now it's not perfect. Obviously, if you have, a lot of things in your backpack, it might get confused. But for most people, it'll allow you to have your backpack you walk through with no problem.
Gotcha. And it does that. These antennas are using what type of is it thermal? Is it some type of what is the mechanism by which
Sure.
you're actually sensing it?
Sure. So we actually use multiple sensors. One is
Hmm.
thermal. We use induction. We use metal detection. And those are and those are, we're adding more sensors going forward because people are asking for explosive detection. So we're adding more sensors going forward. But right now we only detect the
Gotcha.
weapons, the handguns and machine guns.
Gotcha. Just out of curiosity, if you were detecting explosives, would that would be more chemical detection? Okay,
Correct.
so you'd actually end up with
Correct.
another complete. So you'd end up with more than two or three different forms of detection to detect different types of potential threats.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And then
Not everybody will want that, but some people are asking for it, so we're
yeah,
including
and
it.
then we have one other threat. Looking at your website, when I was prepping for this, the dreaded CV-19. So you guys also came up with a kind of a novel solution to turn your weapons detection into a coronavirus protection system as well. How did that work?
Yeah. So what happened was, we were doing visual light detection when we first started in 2018. So the kids were getting shot up on TV, and we decided to come up with that. And the gun has to be 60% shown for it to pick up on the camera that you currently have in your facilities. And then COVID hit, and we're like, oh boy, and everyone's asking for concealed weapons detection, which is where we started with thermal imaging for concealed weapons detection. It was about 60%. Um, um, uh, gosh, sorry, 60% detected and 40% wasn't
Hmm.
detected, right? It was only accurate 60%. So that wasn't good enough. And then COVID hit, and we were like, why don't we just use the technology to detect temperatures, right? So that's why we converted it really quick into temperature detection. And then we went back on the block to get a better concealed weapons detection system, which we just launched a couple months ago, which is 100% effective now, but it also has thermal in it. But that's why we came up with COVID, because we already had that thermal imaging embedded in our software. We just converted a little bit, got the heat seek, HSRP or black reference point, to do the reference point for the heat, and that's how we got up with the temperature detection. Sorry, I talked too
Yeah,
fast.
that's okay. I'm from New York, so it's not it's not too fast for me. Now, other people
Cool.
maybe. So that's interesting, and I don't wish bad upon anybody, but I hope you can't sell these anymore for pandemics because, God bless. I hope
Yeah,
these are all in our rearview mirror, man. I am so
yeah, I
tired
hope
of
so too.
yeah yeah. It's funny. Yeah, you're almost even wishing it's like, okay, I'll live with the gun detection. I don't need the COVID detection anymore. Um,
Unfortunately, it's not the case,
I
but
gotcha.
yeah,
And then so
yeah,
two other. Go ahead.
oh, I was just gonna say it keeps evolving. You know, the virus was made to like it just keeps mutating every couple months, so it's gonna be here forever. It looks like, unfortunately.
Thank you, Chris, for ruining my weekend. Uh, uh, so, who's your predominant customer right now? Who's using it most frequently?
Right now, the hospitals and the casinos are the biggest customers
Okay.
that we
Yeah,
have.
makes sense. And then I'm assuming, so these are, people go through an entryway. Typically, is there physical security there and there's a gate and there's and they're dealing with it at that point? Or do we have situations where it's just notifying somebody, the person's allowed to enter in and then somebody's, how do you, if you do detect a gun, what is the process by which an organization would go and deal with that?
Sure. So it depends on which entryway they enter, right? So if places have 15, 20 different entryways, you're not going to staff every single entryway. Some people choose to, do a choke point, have everyone funnel into one entryway, and then go out. Some businesses choose to put a system at every entry point, which allows them to staff, their main entry points, but all the side entry points are just with our system in it. And then we can lock the doors, access control. If someone comes in a weapon, we lock it down, and they wait for someone to go over there and deal with them. We're also implementing, self-controlled systems where we're going to have, turnstile type of um, forced entry. So the turnstile doesn't open unless they go through the security system and they're clear.
Yeah, that one would seem ideal to me because then we don't even have to deploy somebody else with a gun to deal with a potentially dangerous situation.
Exactly.
Right, we keep the dangerous
Exactly. Go
situation
put your gun
outside.
back in the car.
Yeah, yeah, and we keep it outside of our four walls, which would be nice. Cool. Anything we missed or you think we should discuss?
Um,
You have an actually great
no, I think
product
I'm good.
because it's so darn simple to explain.
Thanks.
Like most products are not nearly, and the value proposition is so obvious. And either I know I need it or I don't think I need it. Right? I mean, it's I'm sure like
Exactly.
selling is kind of easy. You go in and you're like, do you need this? Yes. Okay, good. They understand it intuitively, right?
Exactly. Some places already have them, just the old models, and it takes them
Mhm.
forever. But you're right. Either they're going to want it or they're not going to want it because it's something they need or don't think they need.
Gotcha. Um, and then one last question, just professional curiosity. Is there a play
Huh?
for this with like TSA and airports? Would it improve the way that they're doing things?
Sure, it would definitely improve the way they're doing things. So their current system detect, drugs and other things that we don't do. We only detect weapons.
Ah, I gotcha.
So unless they were willing to give that, yeah. But the way we are in an airport, and the way we kind of managed to get in there was if you go overseas, a lot of airports overseas they have control right when you walk in the door for weapons, and then you go to TSA right later on. So that's kind of like the way we're playing it. Like, look, why don't you just scan everyone coming in the airport so they don't bring weapons in? What happened to Atlanta like a couple months ago? That could have been prevented if they scanned them before they went into TSA. Um, and that's the kind of what this airport is doing up in Seattle. They're scanning everybody when they come into the airport, and if they have a weapon, they ask them to go back out to the car. They don't get penalized. Right now, obviously, if you go through TSA and you have a weapon, you're gonna get written up. You get a ticket, and then you have a record, right? The airports don't want that to happen to everybody because a lot of people forget that they have a weapon on them. It happens. It happened to me twice. One time I got through. Can't believe it. The second time they got me. Um, so yeah, it would be nice to have that pre-screening before you actually go into TSA, so you don't get into trouble.
Yeah, that's actually a really good idea. I never thought about that. I mean, yeah, we're
Yeah,
protecting everyone that's at the gate level, but we're not protecting the people that are checking in our baggage, right?
ticketing.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah, the ticketing people are like, what about us? How come we don't get the protection? I want to go work down at the gate. You know what I mean? I don't want to be out here. Um, all right.
Exactly.
So hopefully you prepared. for my next question. Give me either an amazing or horrible. You could use CISO, physical security director, anyone you want. Give me a fictional character, a real world person you think would make an amazing or horrible CISO, physical security director, and why.
Boy, a character.
Oh, you didn't prepare. You didn't read. You didn't. You didn't
Iron
read.
Man. How about
Iron
that?
Man. Ah. Which Iron Man? Are we talking about Robert Downey Jr.? Is that Iron Man?
Absolutely.
All right.
Why not?
All right, but now you got to tell me why.
What other one would you be talking about? Because he has.
You know what? I don't know. I mean, I'm not a super knowledgeable Marvel guy, but I know there's been 900 iterations of Batman, and there's been 300 iterations of the Joker. I didn't know if there'd been multiple iterations of Iron Man.
No, it's just one that I know of, at least.
Right.
Why? Because he has all the sensors on him, right? He can detect things, concealed weapons. He has that different technologies built into the suit. It'd be like the perfect, security guard, right?
Plus, he's pretty cool.
Yeah, exactly. And he's a big deterrent. So.
Yeah, exactly. And he's got.
And I did read that, actually.
All right. So if somebody's interested in getting in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
Chris at Athena-security.com. Of course, our website is Athena-security.com. If you want to read more about our product. And
sounds good, man.
Doing.
Well, listen, thank you very much for coming on, and it was a lot of fun.
Absolutely.